We are back from Monday Night Football. We got another 2-game slate here. Welcome, guys. My name is DK. We'll be breaking down the NFL DFS slate. Also make content for player prop sites like Prize Picks, Underdog, and Parlay Play. The sponsor of the video, that would be Odds Jam. So right now what I have up on your screen is the Odds Jam Fantasy Sports Optimizer for Prize Picks. So I have NFL filtered here, and you can see that right now the optimizer is currently liking 5 plays. But how it works is, again, it gives you the percent chance to hit, what the line is, which side to take. It also has it for, underdog, parlay play, all that good stuff. So if you guys are interested in signing up, you can use the code DKDFS for 25% off your first month. I also have the link down below. And so let's just get right into the video. Hopefully you had a good day yesterday. For me, not so good, just because when you have a slate like that where like every piece of chalk goes crazy, I'm never going to win in tournaments, right? When literally every piece of chalk goes nuts, I'm just, as a GPP player, I'm just not going to win. So not a winning day there for myself, but it's all good. Hopefully we can keep the Monday magic going from last week, where I won a tournament with both my running backs getting injured. 1,000-person entry, $4,000. Again, maybe we can do that again for this Monday night 2-game slate. I don't know why we have 2 games again. Like, why is it 2 games again, week 3 Monday? I don't know. Could someone tell me? But let's get into it. Let's quickly take a look at where these games are right now as far as the odds go. So for Philadelphia and Tampa Bay, it's about a 5-point spread. And for the Rams and the Bengals, it's about a 3-point spread. We just got news that Joe Burrow is going to try to play. And then as far as the over-under goes in both these games, we have the Eagles and Bucks currently at about 44.5, and Rams, Bengals about 44. Again, what you're looking at right now is the Odds Jam Sportsbook screen, where if you wanted to take a side in a game, it would give you the book that offers the best odds, and these are constantly updating as well. All right, so let's go ahead and close that out. Close out a few tabs here. All right, so we'll start off with Philadelphia, or let's just go position by position. I feel like that's easy on a 2-game slate. So we'll start with the quarterback position, right? We got Hurts, Burrow, Stafford, and Baker Mayfield. I'm taking a quick look at ownership right now for the quarterback position. Nothing super surprising. I will say that Burrow, I think, will be pretty low owned, especially after the first couple weeks if he plays. Does he intend to try to suit up? There's a lot of risk here. But I think what people are going to do is they're just going to avoid it and go somewhere else. So for that reason alone, I think Burrow makes for an interesting tournament play, because he's been really bad first couple weeks. He's obviously dealing with the injury. People are going to be scared to play him, but he's at a reasonable price point. And what if he finishes the game healthy? I would not be surprised if Burrow throws 3 touchdowns. So he's an interesting tournament play. I think by far your safest and definitely your cash game play is Jalen Hurts, the guy with the highest floor plus ceiling. And again, it's because of the rushing upside he brings, averaging 10 rushing attempts a game. When they get close to the goal line, too, they're just going to QB sneak it, too. So, Hurts looks really good at the top, and there's enough value to get him in for sure. As far as Stafford and Baker goes, I think they're playable. I don't know if I'm looking to go that route. I think for me, I'm either going to eat the chalk with Hurts, or maybe I'll play a low-owned Burrow. But Stafford and Baker both have played well so far through 2 weeks. Look at the running back position. So right now, the chalk at running back is Mixon and it's Kyren Williams, and both are expected to be very, very popular. Now, Joe Mixon's at a reasonable price point, 6.3K, and it's really just that he's still operating as a workhorse back here for Cincinnati. Take a look at the snaps last week. He played 47 of the 60 snaps. Now, he hasn't been super efficient. It's not like he's been super efficient with these touches, but he's averaging close to 20 touches a game. Reasonable price point, is involved in the passing game. I think he's a very, very safe play, and I understand why he's chalk. And the other guy that's projected to be chalk is Kyren Williams. And it's kind of the same thing. He just didn't leave the field last game. He didn't. Played 76 of the 80 snaps. He ran 49 routes. He had, how many targets? He had 10 targets. So, Very safe. I think those two are your chalk running back plays. Now, I think your pivot off one of those guys would be Rachaad White. He's coming in with a bit less ownership. Still a guy, though, that is operating as the RB1 for Tampa Bay. Is involved in the passing game as well. He played 51 and 71 snaps. So I like Rachaad White as a pivot. I think he'll come in. Well, he will right now. Looking across the industry, he's projected for a lot less ownership than those other two guys we mentioned. But the key is a fine pivot. And then we got to talk about the Philadelphia running backs, DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell. So I talk about this all the time for DFS is want to avoid groupthink, right? You really, really want to avoid groupthink. So there's a few situations in that for week 2. One was Jerome Ford, right? You can't play a running back against Tennessee. Look what happened the first 2 weeks. You can't do it, right? That was the groupthink. I saw that everywhere. Every piece of content I listened to mentioned that. Everything I saw on Twitter, you can't play Jerome Ford. What happened? Jerome Ford absolutely smashed, right? So it's like you want to try to avoid that groupthink. You really do. So what is the groupthink going to be here for these Philadelphia running backs? It's DeAndre Swift. He's the guy after last game, right? It's very obvious. Look at what DeAndre Swift did. It's got to be the guy, right? I'm not convinced about that. I think ownership is saying that. Like, of these two Philadelphia backs, DeAndre Swift is way more popular than Kenny Gainwell. But Nick Sirianni came out and said he's going to ride the hot hand. So I think for me, if I'm playing one of these Philadelphia running backs, I don't think either are cash game plays, right? But if I'm playing one of these running backs in tournaments, I would rather go to Kenny Gainwell. Yeah, I would rather play the lower owned option here. Just because the groupthink is this is DeAndre Swift's, it's his job, right? He can't lose after last game. Well, Swift is coming in right now at like 3-1 ownership to Kenny Gainwell. And Philadelphia, they literally said they're going to ride the hot hand with those two. So I'm not telling you to play Kenny Gainwell. That's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you at a 3-1 ownership difference, I think it would make more sense in tournaments to go to the lower owned option if the coach flat out said, and he did, they're going to ride the hot hand. So that's my take on the Philadelphia backs. I'm not saying to fade DeAndre Swift, but he is still coming in with a lot of ownership. And like, what happens if Swift is like 45% owned, like he's projected for, and Kenny Gainwell gets like 75% of snaps? Well, then like almost half the field is dead, right? So yeah, Philadelphia, I think it's interesting, a tournament spot there with the running backs. And then I don't think I'm going to look to any of the backup running backs like a Travion Williams or anyone like that. So it's basically the starters for each team and then the two Philadelphia backs. Let's take a look at wide receiver. One guy that I'm really high on for tournaments, and it's weird to say for tournaments, but Jamar Chase, he's not projecting for a ton of ownership right now. Jamar Chase is right now projected for sub 40% ownership on a 2-game slate. Right? And the narrative is, again, you just have to avoid this Bengals offense. They can't move the ball right now. Burrow can't move, right? That's the narrative. You're going to give me one of the best, if not the best wide receivers in the league at sub 40% ownership on a 2-game slate. Yeah, sign me up for that. So I really like Jamar Chase right now. Brown and Smith are both reasonable plays for Philadelphia. I never really have any strong takes with these two guys. Let me see. Both are basically projected for like identical ownership too. So if you're playing one of those two, I think it's basically a coin flip with AJ Brown and with Devonta Smith. All right, so here's another group think, right? We're going to talk about this again. What is the group think narrative right now in Puka Nacua, right? Well, after one game, it was like, oh, I don't know. After he put up that performance against San Francisco, he's the greatest receiver of all time, right? He's the next Cooper Kupp, right? That's everyone saying it. It's Puka Nacua, right? Is he, though? Is he? I'm still not 100% convinced on that. Now, I was really high on Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell before week 1 when absolutely no one talked about them. No one wanted them, right? No one. Go back and watch my week 1 video. I was high on Tutu and Puka when absolutely no one else was. I was all over Tank Dell before week 2 when no one else was. But now the narrative is Puka Nacua is just the best receiver in the league. And I agree. I think Puka Nacua is talented, and it sounds like he is going to play through this oblique issue. But he is projected for a lot of ownership right now. A lot. Now, here's the positive with the Rams receivers, and I talked about this before the season started. They do not rotate guys. right? They just play their starters the entire game. So, I mean, it's hard to ignore the 35 targets through 2 games. But I'll once again mention it. If you want the pivot off Puka Nacua, it is my boy Tutu Atwell, who has played extremely well through 2 weeks, but been overshadowed by Puka, right? And it's not like Tutu is like, again, 20. He has 35 fantasy points through 2 weeks, right? 13 catches, like 200 yards in 2 weeks. And he's coming in with a lot less ownership than Puka Nacua. So that's another one I think you could go to. Right? Maybe you play Tutu over Puka for a lot less ownership. But it all comes down to what the rest of your lineup looks like, right? Let's say, for example, you have like all chalk in your lineup, right? Let's say you have Hurts, you have the 2 chalk backs and Mixon and Kyron Williams, right? You have basically chalk everywhere, and you're deciding between like which Rams receiver you want to go to. Well, in that situation, I would go to Tutu Atwell, right? I would go to the lower owned option because you want to mix in a couple lower owned pieces in your GPP builds. Now, let's say you had a much more contrarian lineup already. Let's say, I don't know, you're playing Joe Burrow double with like Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd. He's not projected for like any ownership. And then you're deciding between the 2 Rams receivers, between Puka and Tutu. Well, then in that situation, I probably would lean to playing Puka over Tutu Atwell. But it's not as much as like I'm not giving you picks. Right? I'm not giving you, you play this guy, you don't play this guy. Because that's not what DFS is. It's about building good lineups, right? All right. So below those 2 Rams receivers, you have Mike Evans at 6'3" and Godwin at 5'7". My breakdown here is I think Godwin is the higher floor play. He's the safer option. He's going to get more of the short 8-odd targets. Well, Mike Evans more the big play guy, a little bit more boomer bust. We've seen the ceiling games from Mike Evans back-to-back weeks. Taking a look at ownership right now between the 2, it's basically the same. So I don't have any super strong takes with those Tampa Bay receivers. I like them both. T. Higgins is 6'2", I think is another pretty safe option, and he's going to play a majority of the game. Right now, he's projecting for similar ownership as Jamar Chase, which I think is pretty crazy. But yeah, I have no issue if you want to go to T. Higgins. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on the Burrow status. But right now, it sounds like he's going to try to play. We talked about Tutu. The other Rams receiver, Van Jefferson, has really been quiet through 2 weeks. He's still having opportunities, though. He still does have 9 targets. I think he's an okay punt play. Like, again, the Rams are just not rotating these guys. He played 66 of the 80 snaps. I mean, Skoranek played a few snaps, but they basically just played those 3 wide receivers the entire game. So if you need a punt wide receiver, I think he's fine, as is Tyler Boyd at 3.5, another guy playing out of the slot that should play a good chunk of the game. Last week, Boyd played 55 of the 60 snaps. I think for me, I would give the edge to Boyd over Jefferson playing in the slot. But not saying you can't play Van Jefferson. And then a couple other guys to mention here in like large field stuff. Trey Palmer is cheap for Tampa Bay. Last week, Trey Palmer played, where is it? He played 35 to 71 snaps, so about half the snaps, and he's 3.1K. He has 5 targets through 2 weeks. And then no Quez Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus should be operating as the wide receiver 3 for Philadelphia. You had Quez Watkins go down early. He played 11 snaps, and Zaccheaus played 35 snaps. So I think Zaccheaus probably plays a bit over half the game playing in the slot, $3,000. Again, a fine large field tournament play. We'll finish up with the tight end position. So Dallas Goedert, I think, is definitely your safest play for sure. He's your cash game play. You can still play him in tournaments too. Like I said, it just depends on what the rest of your lineup looks like. But he's played almost the entire game, 74 of the 77 snaps, and he's cheap, and he's in this Eagles offense, which I think has the most ceiling on the slate. I think the Eagles offense is the most likely to put up the most amount of points. So yeah, Goddard, very, very safe play. Now, if you want your pivot off Dallas Goedert, I think that would be Tyler Higbee. Higbee still playing a good chunk of the game. 74 of the 80 snaps, ran 53 routes. He's been a little bit quiet to start the season, but that doesn't mean he's out of play. He still has 10 targets through 2 weeks. If you go back and look at last season, when Cooper Kupp missed games, like Tyler Higbee had a few really big games. So I think Higbee is a fine pivot off of Dallas Goedert in GPPs. And Goddard projecting for a lot more ownership, but I think Higbee still could match him or score more than him for less ownership. So I think, would be your pivot in GPPs. And then no Irv Smith for Cincinnati. So should be Drew Sample operating as the tight end 1 for the Bengals. He's the flat min 2.5K. I think he's playable. I do. I expect him to play a good chunk of the game. So last week, Irv Smith played 46 snaps and then went down, and then basically Drew Sample came in and played all those snaps that once Irv Smith left, he played the final 14 snaps. So Drew Sample, I think, is a viable punt play. And the last tight end here is Cade Otton, 3K. Another guy that, he's still having a lot of opportunities too. 69 of the 71 snaps. He played 30 routes. So, and he has 9 targets in 2 weeks. So, I think he's an okay punt play too. Looking at the defenses, we know defense is a high variance position. Last Monday night, right, the chalk was the Saints and it was the Browns. And a majority of the field played one of those two. Now, the reason I won the tournament last week was I played a low on defense. I played the Steelers because defense is such a high variance position. Unless there's one defense that's just so insanely underpriced, then I'm usually just going to lean towards playing a lower owned defense in tournaments. Again, though, what I will say, it comes down to the rest of your lineup. So, if you're already mixing in 3-4 low owned plays, you have a very contrarian lineup. I'm way more inclined to eat the chalk defense in that lineup then. Let's say you have all chalk and maybe one lower owned option in your lineup. I'm way more inclined to play a lower owned defense there. So again, it's not a picks thing. I'm not giving you play this defense. You play this wide receiver. It's really about building good tournament lineups, which I focus on in my Patreon. If you guys are interested in that, you can check it out, linked in the description. But back to defense and projections right now. The Bengals are right now projecting for the chalk defense about 2x the ownership. All right, I guess the Bengals and the Eagles right now are projecting to be the chalky defenses. Those are the two favorites. Bengals playing at home. I think that's fine. Again, I think those two would be your safest defenses. If you wanted kind of your, off the board defense, maybe the Rams, just because of Burrow is, somewhat immobile, maybe he's a little bit more inclined to throw picks or, get sacked, right? So I think if you want the lower owned defense, for me, it probably would be the Rams. Now, if things change and Burrow gets ruled out, then I think the ownership will flip. Then I think the Rams will actually be the chalk defense, or if not, the second highest owned defense in slate. And in that situation, maybe I'll look to a lower owned option. But again, it would depend on what the rest of my lineup looks like. All right, so that's going to do it for the 2-game slate, guys. I hope this video helps. Hopefully talking through some of the strategy and groupthink and building out lineups gives you or helps you building your lineups for tonight, for your GPP lineups. But other than that, if you do enjoy, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you guys all in the next video.